Hello, welcome back. This is chapter 19. This chapter is about cash and liquidity management. This is the first part, first clip or first video. Okay, in this we are going to look at how cash is managed. One moment, I'm unable to move on to the next slide. Okay. Here we are. This is the outline. I will just, the key concepts. I'll go to the outline, chapter outline. Okay, so this can be divided into 5 parts. The first part is about reasons for holding cash. Okay, so that will be the first topic. The second topic is about float. What is float? And how does it affect the cash management of a company? So that is the second topic. And the third topic is about cash collection and concentration, and also cash disbursements. So the first part is about collection, and what you do with the collection. You need to collect, and then you need to concentrate. Bring it to one place. So that you can manage it better. And then disbursements. How you make payments using cash. Okay, and then the last part. The fifth subtopic in this chapter is investing idle cash. Idle means excess cash. That means you have additional cash that you have no use for. Then what do you do with that? You invest, and how you invest that. This will be discussed in this chapter. Okay, let's look at the reasons for holding cash. There are 3 major reasons. Okay, the first one is transaction motive. So this is, you can see the reasons as motives for holding cash. The first one is transaction, and the most important in most cases, there are 3, and the most important is this transaction motive. Transaction motive means you hold cash to pay day-to-day bills. This includes expected payments and investments. If you have planned ahead, okay, expected payments, maybe payments for financing as well. Payment for purchases, payment for let's say utilities, payment of wages to workers and so on. All this will come under expected payments. And also investments. If you want to invest in fixed assets, these are planned, because it is expected. Okay, so when it's expected, then it becomes transaction motive. The second most important reason for holding cash is precautionary motive. This is for unexpected payments. You hold cash in case of emergencies. Okay, if there are payments that become due unexpectedly, then you hold this cash for that purpose. This is for precautionary motive, and this is the second most important. Okay, the first one covers expected, the second one covers unexpected payments. And the third motive, the third most important motive for holding cash is speculative motive. This means you hold cash to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. These opportunities can be investment or purchasing opportunities. So these also unexpected. These two, the last two, the less important motives, both has to do with unexpected. Okay, the first one is precautionary, second one is speculative. You can argue that this is the least important, but it's important, but it is least important compared to the other 2 motives. Okay, this is for unexpected investment and purchasing opportunities. Let's say there is a fall in price of raw material or components from your suppliers. Okay, they say that they want to clearance sale, they want to sell it off. Okay, they are willing to sell at a lower price if we can purchase in bulk, for example. And if you don't have enough cash, okay, you don't hold for speculative motive, then you cannot take advantage of this, because you don't have enough cash. You would not be able to purchase in bulk, meaning in large amounts. And therefore you lose this purchasing opportunity. So this is the reason for holding cash for speculative motive. Okay, so this we can summarize these 3 motives into this table, a 2x2 matrix. If you have expected payment or expected investment opportunity, then it is transaction motive. If it is expected payment or expected investment opportunity, then it is transaction motive. If it is unexpected payment, then it is precautionary motive. And if it is unexpected investment opportunity, investment or opportunity for purchasing, then it becomes speculative, motive. So that's how you should see, the three motives for holding cash. These are the most important, motives for holding cash. The most important, arguably, is transaction motive. The second one is precautionary, and the third is speculative motive. Alright, so there is always this trade-off between opportunity cost and holding cost. We're going to look at the costs involved in holding cash. There are two costs. Okay, one is transaction cost, the other is opportunity cost. Okay, so what do we mean by opportunity cost? Opportunity cost is the loss of return from funds had they been invested rather than kept as cash. So if you hold it as cash, the funds as cash, then you lose a return. But if you had invested that, let's say into fixed assets or other investments, there would be some return. Therefore, since you are holding it as cash, you lose that investment return. That's called the opportunity cost. So higher the cash you hold, greater the opportunity cost. Right. Then the other cost will be transaction cost. This is the cost of converting investments to cash. Okay, when you need to make a payment has to be made using cash. Therefore, if you hold too little cash, then you will have to convert investments or assets, fixed assets, for example, or other assets into cash before you can make the payment. Therefore, there will be some losses due to the conversion of investments to cash, especially if you are forced to sell. If you are desperate, then you may not get a good price. So the loss of value is the transaction cost, because you need to convert. Okay, that means if you hold more cash, then you will have lower transaction costs, because you need to convert less. But if you hold too little cash, then your transaction cost will be more because you need to convert more investments into cash. So these two are trade-offs. So lower your cash holding, for example, you have low opportunity cost, but you will have high transaction cost. But if you hold high cash, a lot of cash, then your opportunity cost will be high, but your transaction cost will be low. Again, there will be a trade-off, but the ideal is to find the cash holding somewhere in between, the optimum level, where the opportunity cost and the transaction cost, the total cost of these two is minimized. Okay, so you don't need to minimize opportunity cost or transaction costs separately. You need to minimize the total of these two costs. Okay, so if you are able to minimize, then this is called the optimal cash holding. Okay, so this is an important topic about cash management. Alright, so with that we finish the first topic. We move on to the second topic, and this is about understanding float. I'm going to just skip this because I've got a different slide. Okay, understanding float. Okay, what is float? This explains what float is. Float is the bank or available balance. There are two words referring to the same thing: bank balance or available balance. Here means cash balance in the bank. That is called the available balance. Minus the book or cash balance. The cash balance in the company's books. That is why we call it the book or cash balance. We can say available balance means the balance in the bank, the cash balance in the bank. But cash balance means the cash balance in the book usually. Alright, so the float is the difference between the two. Float means the difference between the two. Book balance responds earlier than the bank balance. Why? Because response here means changes. When there is a payment or when there is a receipt, the book or the cash balance will respond first. Because the cash comes into the company first. Right? Let's say the cash comes in form of a check. This float is very relevant when payments are made or received, yeah, in check form. Yeah, that means there's no cash received, cash in notes, yeah, currency notes, but cash is received in terms of checks, yeah, payment checks. Okay, or you make payments in checks. Yeah, so when that happens, your book balance, yeah, will be revised first. Yeah, if let's say you have a payment that you receive, you will increase your book balance, yeah, your cash balance first, but you will deposit the check in the bank, yeah, and it will take some time for the bank to reflect this increased balance. Therefore, the bank balance will be lower than the book balance once you receive the check. Okay, once the check is cleared, then the two balances will be equal. Yeah, but very rarely it is equal. Why? Because you keep receiving checks and you keep depositing. Yeah, at the same time, you also keep making payments through checks. Okay, and then this will be reflected in the bank balance. Yeah, so there will be some delay. Yeah, there will be some lag between these two. There will be a lag, and therefore there will always be some float. Yeah, that is what we're going to look at in this particular topic. Okay, and this float can be divided into two types of float. Yeah, one is called the disbursement float. The other is called the collection float. Yeah, we'll come to the collection float later. Let's look at the disbursement float. Yeah, disbursement float means the float that arises from a firm making a payment. Yeah, when the firm makes a payment to a supplier, for example, then there is a disbursement float. Yeah, especially when the payment is made using a check. Yeah, check payment. Yeah. Alright, so the book balance will fall first in a disbursement float because you reflect it in your book first. Yeah, so the book balance is higher. Okay, falls first. The bank balance. Yeah, the bank balance is higher than the book balance. Therefore, the float is positive. Okay, the book balance goes down first. Okay, but the bank balance, yeah, is yet to reflect this payment. Yeah, you have made the payment, so your book balance goes down, but your bank balance is still higher. Yeah, because the bank has not received the check for payment from your supplier's bank. Yeah, so therefore the float will be positive. Remember, but the float is always the bank balance or the available balance minus the book balance, not the other way around. Yeah, therefore this is positive because this is higher than the book balance. Yeah, in the case of the disbursement float. All right, then the amount paid. Okay, what does this mean? Yeah, disbursement float. This is the amount paid but still available. Yeah, it means that you have already made the payment. Okay, so even though you have made the payment, the cash is still available in the bank, yeah, for you to use. Okay, so this is what we mean by disbursement float. Yeah, so since it's available, you can actually use it for investment. Yeah, okay, and with the provision that you get the money back. Yeah, let's say you withdraw and then you invest, but you put it back into the bank before, yeah, the payment needs to be made by the bank. All right, so that's what we mean by disbursement float. Yeah, now let's look at collection float. Yeah, it's the diagrammatically opposite to the disbursement float. Yeah, now the collection float, the book balance rises first. It's always the book balance, yeah, or the cash balance that responds first. The book balance rises first because collection, you receive the check. You don't make the check payment. Yeah, you receive check payment from your customers. So the book balance rises first. It goes up first. But the bank balance would be lower, yeah, because that has not been reflected in the bank balance. Therefore, the float will be negative. This, a lower balance, minus this, a higher balance. Yeah, therefore, the float will be negative. Remember, the float is the difference between these two balances. Yeah. This means that the amount is received but still unavailable. Yeah, you receive the check, but the funds, yeah, are not available for you to use because the bank does not reflect that. You don't have the money. You just received the check. Yeah, right. So this is what we mean by collection float. Yeah, and then at the bottom, yeah, if you go down to the bottom, okay, it says net float. Net float is the sum of the disbursement float and the collection float. Yeah? It's the sum of these two. that is called net float. This plus this, yeah, this is